Welcome to another segment of Journey of Hope. Exciting stories of people that have been impacted by the healing ministry at Loma University. All of the people that we've interviewed in the past have been people that have experienced the impact of the ministry there at Loma University Medical Center, and they've talked about it being a magical place, a special place, a place where their lives have been transformed physically and emotionally and spiritually. Our guest today is Richard Schaefer. Richard is our historian for Loma University Medical Center. And I've got a number of the books that I asked Richard to be along. It's a very impressive piece of work here, Richard. Most of them have been published, and some of them are in the final stages. Mm-hmm. But I want you to share with me and the audience here why you think Loma Linda is a special place.
Well, my twin brother and I were born at the Loma Linda Sanitarium in July of 1941. And we came to town for the first time when we were 5 years of age. Our parents built a home over on Mountain View Avenue. And there are two things I remember about that first trip to Loma Linda. One was there was a concrete berm around the southwest edge of the hill. Next picture, please. And it was a slanted concrete berm that is across the street from the Randall Visitor Center today. I'd never seen anything like that before in my life, and I haven't seen anything like that since. And one of the things when I see this berm, and I see it almost every day, I think of the second thing I thought of when I was 5 years of age on that first trip, and that is that Loma Linda is a special place on earth.
Well, one of the books that you've written here is this book, Legacy, and why don't you tell us a little bit about this?
Well, when I first started working here in July of 1966, my boss was Oliver L. Jacques, and within a year he was invited to go to Washington with Congressman Jerry Pettis. And I inherited some of Oliver's responsibilities, including employee orientations. And that meant that I had to study the history of Loma Linda because we wanted our employees to appreciate the heritage of this unusual institution. And that led to writing this book in 1977. It has been updated 5 times. This is the 2005 edition. And there are now 300,000 copies of that book.
And this is the one that we used during the centennial. I mean, this is the latest edition.
That's the latest edition.
Well, there's a lot of things that have transpired here in the last 100 years. And as I mentioned, the patients that come in here and interact with the people here, they know that we have an undergirding philosophy of to make man whole. Mm-hmm. But people and the patients that I've interviewed have talked about the wonderful experience that they've had here, and they've shared their experience. But why don't you tell us from a historical perspective and from your perspective why you believe that Loma Linda is a special place?
In my studies, I've been through all of the board minutes, and I've discovered that all of the original faculty and students felt that they had a unique privilege to be connected, and that was the word they used, to be connected with a divinely appointed institution. And as I have studied, I have taken note of many of the providences that have taken place in the history of this place. And I've also noticed that there were 4 failures before we even got started, and I think that's important to briefly outline that.
Well, that's a part of our history, so why don't you go ahead and share, and I ask you to bring a couple of pictures along to kind of illustrate that.
Okay. The first time someone did something here in Loma Linda, it was called the Mound City Land Association in April of 1875. They wanted to build a boom town here. They were called boomers. They had boomers back in those days, too. They laid out a city, but then they failed. They sold to a farmer named H.E. Hills, who plowed up Mound City, planted crops and orchards, got sick, and died. The next group to come, and by the way, in 1887, the San Bernardino City and County Directory claimed that this area, because of its proximity to Colton and San Bernardino, would probably never amount to anything more than a possible way station.
Oh, really?
Evidently, the Mound City Land and Water Company didn't read that, because that very same year, they started building a luxury hotel on top of the hill. That looked so good from the outside that Scipio Craig, the editor of the Citrograph in Redlands, claimed that the area may someday become world famous as a health resort.
Really?
Now, they failed. The place was vacant for about 12 years, and then the Loma Linda Association came around 1900, and they should have made it work. 80 physicians and 40 businessmen. They had the money and they had the talent to make it work. They refurbished the hotel. They built a recreation hall on top of the hill. They built 5 cottages. That looked so good from the outside that Scipio Craig, the editor of the Citrograph, claimed that it was the best equipped sanitarium in the United States. And that's a recent discovery, and that's important because it tells us what a tremendous effort the Loma Linda Association went through to succeed.
Invested a lot of time and a lot of money, and everything looked like it was going to be a success.
And they failed. Well, then a little Adventist minister came to town. His name was John Burden, and he wanted to turn the place into a Seventh-day Adventist sanitarium. Some of his own colleagues claimed that it would be the height of folly to proceed because they had no money and they didn't even have to do a feasibility study if something like that were available because there were times when the Loma Linda Association had no patients. But there were people of faith. 35 people joined John Burden. They ate out of the institution's garden. They volunteered their time until the place could earn a little profit to make their meager salaries of $12 to $20 a week so that we could be here today.
So they made a very sacrificial beginning, and that was just really the beginning of what happened.
Yes. I think those pioneers would be proud of the fact that the little school of medicine they started in 1909 with 10 medical students and 5 faculty who were general practitioners who had never taught in a medical school in their life is today one of the largest schools of medicine in the western United States. Today
So we have another centennial coming up then.
we have approximately 700 medical students, and their centennial will be starting in 2009. In fact, one of these unpublished books is the 100th anniversary book for the School of Medicine.
All right. Well, there's a lot of things that have transpired since we opened the doors in 1909, and I want you to kind of continue to share with why this is a special place.
Okay, I think those original pioneers who started in 1905 would be proud, with a good kind of pride, of the fact that the little healthcare institution they started is today the only hospital designated by the state of California as a level 1 regional trauma center for the 4 inland counties. That makes this hospital the highest level of care available to patients in a little more than 1/4 of the California landmass. And this is one of the reasons why we have 1,500 to 1,600 helicopter landings at the medical center every year.
Coming in and flying in from all around the area here, and every time a helicopter goes over, there's a critical situation, an emergency, and that's why they're bringing them in here.
That's right. And then there have been major contributions to world medicine. I think they would be proud of the fact that the United States government chose to build a Veterans Administration hospital here. So this is no longer considered to be a way station. It is a special place, and that's the reason why the Jerry L. Pettis Memorial Veterans Medical Center has been built here. In fact, in the 1970s, when the Veterans Administration was building this hospital, they had a policy that they would not build a new medical center unless they could have a close affiliation with a university medical center. So, although I don't think many people know this, virtually everybody who practices medicine or dentist at the Veterans Hospital are on the faculty of Loma Linda University.
Well, it's hard to realize when you think of when the medical center began so many years ago that this was very sparsely populated, and now it's so densely populated throughout the entire area. And so the institution continues to have an increasing importance in the area here.
And there have been major contributions to world medicine that have come from this institution. This is fetal monitoring that was invented by Dr. Edward Hahn from the School of Medicine class of 1950. Dr. Hahn was an electronics engineer before he became a physician. here in Loma Linda. He eventually became a full professor at Yale University and started his research there, then rejoined our faculty, and Loma Linda University Medical Center eventually became the first hospital in the world to routinely monitor deliveries.
So it all started right here at Loma Linda.
Now fetal monitoring has become a part of good obstetrical care in hospitals and clinics around the world. Then there's the School of Dentistry. The Jorgensen technique of dental pain control put this School of Dentistry on the international map and years ahead of its sister schools of dentistry. It is also the home of the first postgraduate program in implant dentistry in the world. And today it is one of the largest programs that is postgraduate programs in implant dentistry.
It sounds like Loma Linda's leading the way again. And
It is.
a lot of these things are not known by the general public. So I'm glad you're sharing some of these things. What other exciting things have taken place here?
Well, then there's the Judkins technique of computer-assisted percutaneous transfemoral selective coronary arteriography.
That was quite impressive. Okay.
Which is the X-ray evaluation of the blood vessels of the heart. It's being used by virtually 100% of the people around the world performing coronary angiograms. Major contribution to world medicine.
And it started here at Loma Linda.
It started, Dr. Judkins was a class of 1947 member, and he started his research up in Oregon, but then he brought it to Loma Linda. And people came from around the world to watch Dr. Judkins perform his art and his science. Then there's the infant heart transplant program, started in 1984 by Dr. Leonard Bailey. Now we're talking microsurgery, and we're using little hearts that weigh about 1 ounce. You could mail it for the 1 postage stamp. That's how much they weigh. And Dr. Bailey and his team have learned some really interesting things. One of the things they learned was that the newborn has an immature immune system and is less likely to reject the graft than is an older child or adult, especially if the transplant is done in the first 30 days of life. They also learned that the size match is not as critical as they once thought it would be. We can transplant hearts that are a little too small or considerably too large. They come under the influence of the recipient and grow to be the right size. And one of the interesting things, I think, has to do with something called ischemic time. That is the time the organ is without a blood supply. It was once thought that we had a maximum of 4 hours to transplant a human heart. And after 4 hours, there would be too much damage from lack of oxygen.
So that greatly limited the possibilities of where they secured the donor from then.
Well, what we did was we brought the donors in from all over the United States, Syracuse, New York, Toronto, Canada, and we did the procurement and the transplant in the medical center. But in 1986, there was a dramatic increase in the number of multi-organ procurements, so that meant we had to cooperate or coordinate with other transplant institutes. Well, that's good because one donor can save more than one life, but it wasn't good for Loma Linda because there's no way that a transplant team can come to across the United States, even flying in a corporate jet, and do a transplant and do everything in 4 hours.
Pretty difficult.
So we've had to push back the edges of science. And we have gone incrementally from 4 hours to 5 hours, 6, 7, 8, 9, almost 10 hours, more than double what was thought to be the maximum amount of ischemic time. And in so doing, this hospital has literally opened the state of Alaska for organ procurement. We have been all the way to Anchorage and even farther to Nova Scotia, eastern Canada, to save a baby's life here in Loma Linda. And by the way, that says something special about this community. The fact that 100 people working behind the scenes, often in the wee hours of the morning, we're talking administrators, social workers, chaplains, registered nurses, to immunologists, ethicists, anesthesiologists, jet pilots, and transplant surgeons, all working together to try to help one little person.
Loma Linda is a special place.
Special place.
What other kind of contributions?
Well, there's Dr. James Slater, started with the computer-assisted radiation therapy planning in the early 1970s. This was something that allowed radiation oncologists to visualize a dose distribution of radiation inside the human body. Major contribution to world medicine. Then in 1990, Dr. Slater opened the world's first hospital-based proton treatment center for the treatment of cancer and other diseases. It's an awesome facility. The equipment alone weighs 400 tons. It was an $85 million project when it was opened. And
that was in those days.
And we have people coming here from around the world. In fact, the most impressive one, the person with the most impressive background, I just got permission just recently to mention his name. His name is Dr. Sharpak. He came to Loma Linda from CERN, Switzerland, where they have, near Geneva, the world's largest proton synchrotron. It is a superconducting super collider. And this man not only has a Nobel Prize in Physics for 1992, but he has 16 patents, and his Nobel Prize led to other Nobel Prizes. He chose to come to Loma Linda because Loma Linda is a special place on Earth.
Many of the patients that we've interviewed have been impacted by the Proton Center, and as you know, when we started, we were treating 1 or 2 types of cancers, and now they're treating 44 different types of cancers.
Yeah, it's an incredible facility. In December of 1990, I accompanied Medical Center Administration to NASA headquarters in Washington, D.C., and I heard Daniel Golden, who was the director of NASA at that time, talk about a memorandum of agreement that we had with NASA to use our proton synchrotron for research to help improve the safety of the astronauts flying in the space shuttles and also the International Space Station.
So we're doing research in collaboration with them.
I heard Daniel Golden on that occasion say 3 really profound things. Number 1, he said, "This is the ultimate in technology transfer." And the reason he said that is because Loma Linda transferred the technology from the high-energy physics research laboratories of the world into the hospital setting. People who were involved with us came from Sweden, Switzerland, Japan, the former Soviet Union, and from across the United States. Lawrence Berkeley Laboratory, Harvard Cyclotron Laboratory, Fermi National Accelerator Laboratory, Brookhaven, Los Alamos, Argonne National Laboratories, just to mention a few. There were 100 to 120 scientists who volunteered their time, paid their own transportation costs to be part of this project. It was an inspiration.
People from all around the world, and that's
I heard
amazing.
the second thing he said was that this was the only place on Earth where NASA could do everything it needed to do on one of its major projects, which leads to the third really profound thing he said. Loma Linda is NASA's gateway to Mars.
Oh, really?
And here's the NASA research laboratory that we set up, and here's the spacesuits that we studied. And the reason he said that is because the greatest danger to astronauts in space, that is over a long time, is positively charged particles, most of which are protons. They come from solar flares, which are unpredictable. So NASA used to fly its space shuttles trying as much as possible to avoid solar flares. But now they're building the International Space Station, after which they want to go back to the moon and on to Mars, and there's no way they can avoid solar flares. So NASA has come to Loma Linda to try to determine how to protect its astronauts and their electronic gear from charged particles in space, thus NASA's gateway to Mars.
And Loma Linda continues to be on the cutting edge of the research that's going on. And, of course, the research that goes on here makes an impact upon the other institutions that are also developing proton centers.
Yes. There are new ones. This was the only one in the world for 11 years. Now there's one at MD Anderson in Houston. There's another one at Massachusetts General Hospital. There's one in Florida, another one in Kentucky. They're proliferating, but Loma Linda
One in Indiana.
paved the way.
Yeah.
Now, in closing, I would like to quote to you from a letter that was received here in Loma Linda by Dr. Percy T. McGann in 1916.
Hey, I think just before we do, we've got a few minutes left here.
Okay.
I want you to tell us about this book, Legacy, because it's made an impact. 300,000 of these copies are out there. Why don't you tell us what this book is all about?
Okay.
Because this book is available for people that would like to write into LLBN. We're going to make it available for a small donation. And this has gone through 6 printings. So tell us about this book and what it's all about.
Well, it started telling about the history of Adventist medicine. And so it includes the Battle Creek Sanitarium, Dr. John Harvey Kellogg, some of the very interesting things that happened there. That's all part of our heritage. Famous patients, Henry Ford, Harvey Firestone, J.C. Penney, Montgomery Ward, Thomas A. Edison, just to mention a few, Amelia Earhart. And then it talks about the transition of Adventist medicine to Loma Linda and all the background of how that happened. And so it tells the people here today, including our present medical students, this is given to our medical students.
This book here?
This is, okay. Every year. And it's also used as a textbook for 4 classes here at the university. I hope it helps people to have a greater appreciation for what I consider to be God's institution, and to realize also that this is a special place on earth.
Well, not only is it a special place, but you and I have had a number of conversations, and I've had you share with some of the patients before of the divine providence and how, the doors seem to be closed time and time again, and yet God intervened. Mm-hmm. So it is a special place. It's a divinely ordained place, and you've touched on a number of the different things here that have made an impact. Tell us about this book that you're working on for the School of Medicine.
Okay, this is the 100th anniversary book for the School of Medicine. It's entitled Of the Highest Order, and it is an incredible story. It includes the consolidation of the School of Medicine from Los Angeles to Loma Linda. You see,
which took place when?
That took place, the vote was in September of 1962. But from 1913 on until 1962, we went to Los Angeles for clinical experience. And this became the greatest controversy in our 100-year history, because the Council on Medical Education wanted us to be on one campus. We weren't the only ones that were split. Cornell University was split. Stanford University was split. But our problem was, where are we going to go? Are we going to go to Los Angeles, or are we going to come to Loma Linda? The basic sciences faculty here in Loma Linda absolutely refused to go to Los Angeles, and they were considered to be difficult. The people who supported them said that if you move to Los Angeles, you will alienate the church constituency that has supported this place since almost the very beginning. On the other hand, the volunteer clinical faculty in Los Angeles said, if you move to Loma Linda, you will kill the School of Medicine. It will not survive. Its accreditation will not survive out there because there still are not enough potential patients.
Sound like a no-win situation almost.
It went on for decades. And how that all was resolved is an incredible story, and it's in here with documentation that I think some of the participants didn't even know about, that I found in files and private correspondence and everything. This is an incredible story.
That's going to be an exciting story. There's another book here called The Railroad to the Moon. Just briefly share what that book is about.
That was the Medical Center's 100th anniversary book, and I participated in that. In fact, wrote parts of it, specifically about the Proton Treatment Center and the Infant Heart Transplant Program.
And how did you come up with a title like that?
It was something I found in one of the personal files that when I was doing research for the School of Medicine book. Dr. Burton Briggs met me in the cafeteria, and he told me that his father, Dr. Bernard Briggs, who was involved with the consolidation, had a file. Would I like to see his file? So when I was going through that file, that's where I found some of the correspondence between people here in the General Conference. I found a letter from Dr. John Harvey Kellogg to Dr. George Thomason, who was a very well-liked member of the faculty, but the letter from Kellogg was trying to dissuade Thomason from joining the faculty in 1912. And why it was in this file, I don't know, but that's where this title came from. Kellogg said, for this place to succeed would be like trying to build a railway to the moon. And that's where that title came from.
All right. Well, you were going to share a quote a little bit while ago, and you had a couple of slides we wanted to use in closing.
Yes. The letter came from Dr. John Harvey Kellogg to Dr. Percy T. McGann regarding the School of Medicine. And here you can see the School of Medicine in the background of the Good Samaritan statues. And it said, on my way home, and by the way, Dr. Kellogg was the one who invented Dr. Kellogg's cornflakes. He said, on my way home, I happened to run across one of the most prominent and influential members on the Council of Medical Education. He incidentally mentioned to me that the status of Loma Linda was up before the committee at this time. Remarks which he made more than justified me in reiterating what I said to you in my former letter that the future of the Loma Linda Medical School is absolutely hopeless. The medical profession will not tolerate such a thing as a medical college under sectarian control. I am as certain as I am alive that the Loma Linda Sanitarium will never get any higher recognition than it gets now. Next picture, please. If you are convinced that I am right, you would hesitate to ask poor men and women who have barely sufficient to supply themselves with the necessities of life and seldom are able to indulge in the smallest luxuries to invest their hard earnings in an enterprise that has no future.
Divinely ordained. God had his hand over the institution from the very beginning. And even though a lot of the leaders, the early leaders there were kind of not only hesitant, they were kind of bucking the whole thing. But when God has his hand on something, as we allow him, he opens doors. And, thousands upon thousands of people have now come through this institution, have been impacted by the healing ministry. And you've highlighted a number of the contributions that have been made here by Loma Linda, by the faculty, by the professors that are here. And the influence of Loma Linda extends beyond the borders of the city of Loma Linda, beyond the Lynn Empire, and beyond even the United States. It's worldwide. And Dick, I want to thank you for joining us here on Journey of Hope, because you've certainly highlighted many of the significant contributions that this institution has made. Again, we want to thank our listening audience. The book Legacy is available. This is Richard's story. It's the Heritage of Loma Linda University Medical Center, and we have the Centennial Edition, and it is available for a small contribution sent to LLBN. Again, we want to thank you for joining us. I'm Lynn Martell with Loma Linda University Medical Center, the Department of Radiation Medicine, and LLBN. Thank you for joining us, and may God bless you in this week to come. I know that he has a wonderful plan for you. Thank you, and God